welcome to my YouTube channel, Fantasy World. Today I'm going to be reading the book called Winterhouse by Ben Guterson. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 5. If you guys haven't seen the rest of the chapters, you guys can go and check out those videos. And this is called An Introduction and a Good Fit. And one of the ways to transform the word fit into the word box is this: fit, bit, big, bog, and box. And that's how you transform the word fit into the word box. So let's get right into it. A tall man in a heavy wool blazer, a crisp white shirt, and a black tie that looked like a large bow was striding toward them and grinning. He was old, maybe 75, Elizabeth thought. And even though he had white hair and was slim, he seemed full of life, as though he'd been a mountain climber and was not only still strong, but had some force inside him that he'd soak up over a lifetime out of doors. His face was ruddy, and he had a thin mustache and a trim beard. Not one of those bushy ones that look untamed and dirty, but one so neat and white it made him look dashing. He stopped before Elizabeth and held out his hand. "A very good evening to you," he said. His eyes were dark and powerful. "I'm Norbridge Falls, and I believe you're Elizabeth Somers." He nodded to Jackson. Elizabeth shook his hand. His grim grip was strong and steady. "How did you know my name?" she said. "I mean, good evening to you too, sir." He spread his arms wide. "Winterhouse is mine," he said with complete assurance, as though informing her he had a beard on his face. "And I'm supposed to know these things. Please call me Norbridge as well." He laughed pleasantly, not in the way Elizabeth was accustomed to hearing her aunt or uncle laugh, as though always trying to let her know how much smarter they felt themselves to be. And then he stroked his beard. "Besides, I look over a list of people who were supposed to arrive today. Elizabeth Somers was the only 11-year-old girl scheduled to come by herself. And she was the only 11-year-old girl slated to arrive on the late bus. And right now, you're the only 11-year-old girl standing here in front of me at 10 o'clock at night. So you must be the one and only Elizabeth Somers." His eyes danced, as though he'd just solved the riddle and was glad to share the answer with her. "You're right," she said, though some parts of her felt it didn't quite add up. "I just got here." "2 rooms," the man in black yelled. The woman with him was scowling and shaking her head. "Please excuse me," Jackson said, glancing furtively at the other bellhop, speaking to the couple. While I assist my colleague." He nodded to Norbridge Falls and slipped away. Norbridge regarded the man and woman in black for a moment, and then looked to Elizabeth. "You're all set?" he said to her. He glanced at her backpack. "Traveling light. Very good. I like to do the same. 1 person, 1 bag, 100 pounds of stuff. Or maybe 90 pounds less than that. Why don't we get you to your room? Number 213, if I'm not mistaken." "Sir, Norbridge," he cut in immediately. "Norbridge," Elizabeth continued, "when you said that Winterhouse was yours, what did you mean?" He put a hand on his mouth and seemed to be giving her question careful consideration, as though he'd never heard anything quite like this before. His eyes narrowed, and he said his chin firmly, and then he reached out a hand and touched Elizabeth just behind her ear before pulling his hand back quickly. Something was in it. "Do you always keep money back there?" he said, and he held this open palm before her to reveal a coin the size of a silver dollar, though this was golden and didn't look like any coin Elizabeth had seen before. She gasped. "How did you do that?" His hand had been empty, she was sure. Before he had reached out to her, Norbert shrugged. "I'm not the one with money in my hair," he said. He pinched the coin and held it up more closely to Elizabeth. It had a picture of the Winterhouse Hotel stamped on it, and underneath it were the words Norbridge Falls, proprietor. "You run Winterhouse?" Elizabeth said. Norbridge smiled again, dropped the coin into his breast pocket. "I run it, yes. I own it. Winterhouse was built by my grandfather, Nestor Falls, back in 1897, and I've been running it ever since I took over from my father, Nathaniel Falls, nearly 45 years ago. It's late, though." He glanced at the man and woman in black before studying Elizabeth again. He looked concerned. "You must be tired," he said. "A little," Elizabeth said, because she didn't want to contradict him. In truth, given her long nap on the bus and her surprise and excitement at now being at Winterhouse, she wasn't tired at all. "But I'm good at keeping my stamina up." Norbridge clenched a fist before him as if to indicate agreement. "I love that word, stamina." He looked back to the man and woman in black, and his face darkened. "Let's get you to your room, though." He snapped his fingers as though an idea had just come to him. "And why don't we grab a piece or two of Flushkin on our way?" "Of what?" she said. But Norbridge had already pivoted abruptly and was striding off as though it was the most natural thing in the world that Elizabeth would follow. And indeed, she fell and stepped right behind him. So late, Norbridge said to himself. It seemed, and as they reached the table with the puzzle on it, he lifted a hand in greeting and said, "Gentlemen, how is the puzzling going this evening?" Though he showed no sign of slowing down. 3 pieces today." One of the men, tall and thin and mostly bald, said, pointing with pride to the table. "The sky's coming along, but slowly, too slowly," said the other man, who was short and very plump, with a thick mustache. "A productive day's work," Norbridge called out, his back now to the 2 men as he kept striding onward. The heavy man nodded to Elizabeth. "Good evening," he said. Elizabeth stopped. "Thank you." She was right in front of the long table now, which was covered with thousands and thousands of puzzle pieces, and the solid rectangular rim of the puzzle itself, with little cluster of joined pieces situated within the frame here and there. It was massive, an enormous sprawl of tiny shapes. "Good evening to you too," she said. Elizabeth stopped and looked over his shoulder at Elizabeth. "Our pride and joy," the heavy man said, spreading his hands out above the table as if to offer her a selection of jewelry. "It's massive," Elizabeth said, trying to make sense of the picture that was developing inside the borders of the puzzle's frame. "What is it?" The thin man raised a finger as if about to start counting. "A great Himalayan temple," he said. His voice boomed. "High, high up in the mountains." "You can see the picture right there," the plump man said, pointing to a huge tin box along the end of the table. On it was painted an imposing stone temple with colorful flags all around it, and in the background a rise of snow-clad mountains beneath a brilliant blue sky. "That box looks very old-fashioned," Elizabeth said. The pieces, too, she saw, looked thicker and sturdier than the stiff blobs of cardboard she assumed were typical for puzzles. "This was my grandfather's puzzle," Norbridge said. "It's an antique." "If we didn't have the box," said the plump man, shaking his head sadly, "we wouldn't have nothing to guide us. No picture, no image. Even so, its scale and great and determination at this point." He sighed. "We are making our way through it. It's a slog." Norbridge approached. "Mr. Wellington," he said to the tall man, "and Mr. Rashbrook," he said to the short man, "please meet Elizabeth Somers, who has just now arrived and will be staying with us into the new year. She traveled with only a single bag and does not tire easily." There were bows and greetings all around. "But as the hour is growing late, we need to get her to her room." He arched his eyebrow as if to bring an end to the visit. Elizabeth, though, was studying a piece just at the edge of the table. She had a strange sensation of certainty as she looked at it, something similar to the feeling, though not as intense or startling. Nothing was going to fall or shatter or topple, she was certain. Instead, she felt she understood just where the tiny shape needed to go. As the three men watched, she picked it up, looked here and there across the table, and then moved directly to a cluster of a dozen pieces already connected, and locked hers into the upper corner. She pressed it in snugly and looked up. "It fits," she said. Mr. Rajput gasped. "Astounding," he said. "How did you see that straight off?" said Mr. Wellington. "The colors, I guess," Elizabeth said, though she was just as surprised herself as what she had done. "It just seemed to go there." Norbert stroked his beard again and squinted at her. "Very nice," he said. "Sometimes it takes a fresh set of eyes to see what's right in front of us." He winked at the two men and then extended his hand to Elizabeth. "You can help these gentlemen tomorrow, if you'd like. But now we should get you to your room." Mr. Wellington nodded to Elizabeth. "We hope to have you your expert assistance whenever you have time to spare." "I love puzzles," Elizabeth said. "I'll be sure to come back." She adjusted the strap of her backpack on her shoulder, waved goodbye, and trotted after Norbridge, who was already rounding the corner just ahead. "And you will be pleased to show us to our room immediately," someone yelled. Elizabeth glanced behind her to see the man in black screaming at Jackson and the other bellhop. "Be careful with my books!" Jackson and three other bellhops lifted the long crate and began to follow the man and woman in black, the whole group looking for all the world like a funeral procession, which is exactly what Elizabeth kept thinking as she hurried out of the lobby behind Norbridge Fall. Well, that is it for chapter 5. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please hit the like button, and maybe if you want, the subscribe button as well. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can go ahead and hit the notifications bell as well, so your phone gets sent a notification when I post a new video. Well, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Peace. Thanks for watching.